These next few videos are about IELTS reading, and I'm going to invite you to put on your test writer hat. This video looks at common mistakes in IELTS reading. We'll look at the most common mistakes people make when they write their own reading test examples, the bad advice that these examples produce, and why this keeps you stuck at a lower level. Don't forget to download the worksheet in the link below, and look for the exercise numbers here and in the timestamps. If you look online, you'll find thousands of videos about IELTS reading. A large number of these focus on true-false not given questions, and many of these videos present a rather confusing picture of these tasks. They talk about common traps like comparisons and tell you to look out for words like all, some, the majority, and so on. They also warn you that these questions are confusing and say that test writers like me try to trick you in tasks like this. Other videos tell you that IELTS reading is easy and that you can guess up to 80% of the answers without even reading, or that you can answer by just matching words. One video tells us that 3 matches means the answer is true, 2 matches means false, and 1 match means not given. In fact, we hear the word match used quite a lot in these videos. And this is a trick you'll often hear for multiple choice questions. Just eliminate all the silly options, or the options that are obviously wrong because they're not in the passage. Tricks like matching words and crossing out the silly options are supposed to make the test easier and help you avoid reading too much. People who believe these ideas reinforce them by writing examples to match. For example, to demonstrate the idea that these questions are confusing, they produce confusing examples like this, where we're told the passage will say, all cats are black, and the question will say, some cats are black. We see a lot of examples like this, focused on the difference between all, the majority, some, and so on. You can even find examples like this in test materials and videos that look very official. These questions are good examples of the type of mistakes that new test writers make when they begin writing test materials. They have several features in common. The first common element is a passage that consists of a single sentence that matches the statement in the question very closely. The second pattern here is that all of the false questions are based on understanding the difference between words like all, many, some, and so on. It's true that examples like this are tricky and confusing. They present a sort of mental puzzle, because these statements feel at least partly true, or not completely false. To try and answer, the reader has to puzzle over the difference between 2 words or phrases. So this is not a measure of your reading skills. Instead, this is closer to the way we teach the difference between words like all and some. But the most important common feature here is that none of these examples reflect questions you'll find in the real IELTS reading test. Unfortunately, materials like these lead to bad advice about IELTS reading. For example, we can see where the idea of matching comes from, and the advice that you don't need to read very much of the passage. With these examples, we can just match words and apply this formula. People then expect to find the same patterns in the real test and to be able to use these tricks to answer as quickly as possible and read as little as possible. When it comes to true and not given questions, we can see another common pattern or mistake in these materials. The yes or true statements tend to be very easy to match, but the not given questions are often a long and slightly odd statement about the overall topic of the passage. As a result of using materials like this, people conclude that a not given question is like a frustrating trick being played on you, where you're sent to look for something that isn't there. And this leads to bad advice like this, which says that if you can't find it, it's not given. Looking for patterns like this in the real test is like seeing a pattern in the clouds and expecting to always see the same pattern. But there's an even bigger problem here. In my last video, I talked about using what language experts know about language learners who get a high score. I recommended using this knowledge to help you study for the test and improve your score. Similarly, we can use what language experts know about low scorers to find out what you should not do. In reading and listening, we know that low scorers rely on matching words. They don't use a range of reading skills like the high scorers, and this affects their score. If we want to accurately measure your reading skills, we have to give you the opportunity to show these higher level skills. And it's these skills you need to develop and practice if you want to get a high score. But with questions that train you to just match words, you're only practicing the very lowest skills. So, using examples like these and following advice about matching words means you're practicing staying at a lower level. We can see the same problem in other tasks too. For example, in this matching headings task, we only need to read the first sentence of each paragraph and match words in the headings. Which leads to bad advice like this, telling you to just read the first sentence of each paragraph. Another common test writing mistake is using complicated and technical passages like this one, then writing test questions where the reader can use logic to guess the answer without actually reading the passage. As we saw earlier, with multiple choice questions, we often see this advice to cross out the options that are obviously wrong. Let's put on our test writer hat and look at an example from the Cambridge practice test books to see if this advice applies in IELTS. This is a question from Cambridge IELTS 10. The first thing to notice is that we know where to look for the answer. The second feature, and one of the reasons these test questions are so difficult to write, is that all of the options are feasible. That means that there are no silly options or ones that are very clearly wrong. Notice also that we can't just match words. We need to read. You can only find the answer by carefully reading this part of the passage. What's more, we need to have a global understanding of the passage, as well as an understanding of the information in the previous paragraphs. We can't just guess answers using our logic alone. That's because the test writer's job is to force you to read, so that you can show your higher level reading skills and be rewarded for using them. But that doesn't happen with this example from a free test. We can easily use our logic and what we know about coffee drinking to cross out some very unlikely answers, just like the advice says. We've effectively answered the question without reading, and we can quickly match the words in the passage and the question to check the answer. We need to do very little reading to answer correctly. You will not find examples like these in the real test, which is why this advice will not work in IELTS. In part 2 of this video, I'll be looking in more detail at true, false, not given questions. In the meantime, you can practice building the right skills here. And be sure to subscribe to my channel to get notifications about new videos.